The mysterious and deadly legacy of Jesse James, inside the mind of the Wild West's most infamous criminal. Have you ever wondered about the mysterious and deadly legacy of Jesse James? Join us as we take you on a journey through the mind of the Wild West's most infamous criminal, exploring the legends, myths, and brutal realities of his life and death. Jesse James was born in Clay County, Missouri on September 5, 1847. He was the third child of his parents, Robert and Zerelda James. As a child, Jesse was raised on a farm, and he learned the value of hard work at a young age. But Jesse's life was about to take a drastic turn. When Jesse was just a young boy, the Civil War erupted, and Missouri became a battleground. Jesse's family was divided in their loyalties. His father fought for the Confederacy, while his stepfather was a Union sympathizer. The war was brutal and unforgiving, and it had a profound impact on Jesse's life. As the war raged on, Jesse's family was subjected to frequent raids and attacks. The James family was targeted by Union soldiers, who accused them of aiding Confederate guerrillas. In one incident, Union soldiers beat Jesse's mother and hung his stepfather from a tree, leaving him for dead. These traumatic events left a lasting impression on Jesse. He developed a deep-seated hatred for the Union and became determined to seek revenge. As a teenager, Jesse joined a group of Confederate guerrillas known as Bushwhackers. They carried out raids and attacks against Union soldiers and sympathizers, becoming infamous for their brutality. Jesse quickly established himself as a skilled fighter and leader among the Bushwhackers, but he also began to develop a taste for the outlaw life. He saw the war as an opportunity to make a name for himself, and he relished the excitement and danger of it all. When the war ended in 1865, Jesse returned to civilian life, but he found it difficult to adjust. The war had left him with a burning desire for revenge, and he struggled to find a purpose. He turned to crime, robbing banks, trains, and stagecoaches. Jesse James had become an outlaw, and his legend was just beginning. Jesse James' life as an outlaw began in earnest when he joined forces with his brother Frank and a group of former Confederate soldiers known as the James Younger Gang. Together, they carried out a series of daring robberies that made them infamous throughout the Wild West. The James Younger Gang's first major heist took place in 1866, when they robbed the Clay County Savings Association in Liberty, Missouri. The gang made off with over $60,000 in cash and bonds, and they escaped without firing a single shot. The gang's success continued, and they went on to rob banks, trains, and stagecoaches throughout the Midwest. They were known for their daring raids and their willingness to use violence when necessary. They also developed a reputation for being chivalrous outlaws, who never robbed from the poor and always treated their hostages with respect. One of the most famous robberies carried out by the James Younger Gang was the robbery of the First National Bank of Northfield, Minnesota, in 1876. The gang had planned to rob the bank and escape to Canada, but the heist went awry when the townspeople fought back. The ensuing gun battle left 2 members of the gang dead and several others wounded. Jesse and Frank James were able to escape, but the failed robbery marked a turning point for the gang. After the Northfield robbery, the James Younger Gang became more desperate and reckless. They began to rob more frequently and with less caution, often leaving behind evidence that could be used to track them down. They also became more violent, killing innocent bystanders and lawmen who stood in their way. In 1881, the James Younger Gang attempted to rob the First National Bank of Northfield again. This time, however, they were ambushed by a group of Pinkerton detectives, and a fierce gun battle ensued. The gang was outnumbered and outgunned, and they were forced to surrender. 3 members of the gang, including Cole and Bob Younger, were captured and sentenced to life in prison. Frank James surrendered a few months later, but Jesse remained on the run. Jesse James continued to rob banks and trains until his death in 1882. He was shot in the back by Robert Ford, a member of his own gang who hoped to collect the reward money for capturing him. With Jesse's death, the James Younger Gang came to an end. The reign of terror that the James Younger Gang had inflicted on the Wild West was over, but their legend lived on. Jesse James became a folk hero, a symbol of rebellion against authority and the establishment. His life and exploits have been the subject of countless books, movies, and TV shows, cementing his place in American history as one of the most infamous outlaws of all time. Jesse James' life as an outlaw was short but legendary. But his legacy did not end with his death. Instead, it has been shrouded in mystery and surrounded by folklore and legends. One of the most enduring legends surrounding Jesse James is the belief that he never actually died. According to this theory, The man who was killed by Robert Ford in 1882 was not Jesse James at all, but a look-alike who had been hired to impersonate him. Proponents of this theory point to supposed discrepancies in the physical description of Jesse James and the man killed by Ford, as well as alleged sightings of Jesse James throughout the years following his supposed death. Another legend surrounding Jesse James is the claim that he buried a vast treasure somewhere in the Midwest. According to this legend, the treasure includes gold, silver, and other valuables that Jesse and his gang stole during their reign as outlaws. Treasure hunters have been searching for the James gang's loot for decades, but so far, no one has been able to find it. Despite these legends and mysteries, historians agree that Jesse James was a real person and that he led a gang of outlaws who robbed banks and trains throughout the Wild West. They also agree that Jesse James was a controversial figure who was both revered and reviled by the people of his time. Some people saw Jesse James as a hero, a rebel who stood up to the corrupt and oppressive forces of the government and the banks. Others saw him as a criminal, a dangerous outlaw who used violence and terror to achieve his goals. The truth, as is often the case, lies somewhere in between. Jesse James' legacy as an outlaw and a folk hero has continued to fascinate people throughout the years. He has been the subject of countless books, movies, and TV shows, each adding their own interpretation to the legend of the man who robbed banks and trains and who, for better or for worse, has become an iconic figure in American history. The legacy of Jesse James was not just shrouded in mystery and folklore, but also in violence and revenge. After his death, his gang disbanded, but many of its members continued to live a life of crime. Some even formed their own gangs and carried out robberies and other violent acts. One of the most infamous examples of this was the James Younger Gang, which included Jesse James' brother, Frank James, and two of his cousins, the Younger brothers. The gang continued to rob banks and trains, and they became notorious for their brutal and violent tactics. They would often kill anyone who got in their way, including innocent bystanders. The law eventually caught up with the members of the James Younger Gang, and they were either killed or sentenced to long prison terms. But the legacy of violence and revenge did not end there. In 1889, Robert Ford, the man who had killed Jesse James, was shot and killed by a man named Edward O'Kelly. O'Kelly claimed that he had killed Ford as revenge for killing Jesse James, whom he saw as a hero. The violence continued into the 20th century, with people still seeking revenge for Jesse James' death. In 1935, a man named J. Edgar Hoover, who was the director of the FBI at the time, claimed that he had uncovered evidence that Jesse James had not been killed by Robert Ford, but had instead faked his own death and gone on to live a long and peaceful life under a new identity. The claim was widely ridiculed and dismissed by historians and experts, but it shows the enduring power of the legend of Jesse James and the impact that his life and death had on the people of his time and beyond. The legacy of Jesse James is a complex and multifaceted one, filled with mystery, legend, and violence. While his actions as an outlaw were undoubtedly criminal, his legacy as a folk hero and rebel has continued to inspire people throughout the years. Whether seen as a hero or a villain, Jesse James remains one of the most iconic figures of the Wild West and an enduring symbol of American history and culture. Thank you for taking the time to explore the mysterious and deadly legacy of Jesse James with us. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content like this, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel.